welcome everyone to both those of you in the classroom and those of you watching online. I'm Grandmaster Benjamin Bok, I'm the Grandmaster in Residence. And tonight we're going to be having a look at some games of the Candidates Tournament. The Candidates Tournament concluded just a couple days ago. And it was won by the 17-year-old Gukesh from India. Absolute sensation, youngest Candidates winner ever. And for those of you who don't know, if you win the FIDE Candidates Tournament, you can challenge the current world champion for the World Championship match. So if he wins that, he becomes world champion, and that would be at the age of 18, breaking the record. Or, you know, there's some dispute about this, but he would definitely be, he would probably be the youngest. Anyway, let's have a look at some of his games from the Candidates. In this game, he was playing against Vidit Gujrathi, and this was one of the games that I liked the most of him. So let me go ahead and flip the board. Yeah, there we go, because this was a game he played with the black pieces. So hello everyone in the Twitch and YouTube chat. Hello Michael, Subham, Kai, Euphemus. Good to see you guys. All right, and hello Logan as well. All right, so in this game, white played e4, and black responded with e5. So e5, I would say the top level is black's most popular choice. It's just the most solid. The thing is, there's nothing wrong with, let's say, a Sicilian, but there's so many sharp lines that white can go for. And if something goes wrong in the Sicilian, sometimes you can just lose the game. Whereas in e4, e5, what is the worst thing that can happen? Maybe you get a slightly worse position. So that's why the top players like to play this one. All right, so knight f3, knight c6, and here Vidit plays the move bishop to c4, the start of the Italian opening. So for many, many years, the move bishop b5 was the most popular, the real Lopez. But in recent years, the Berlin has become such an effective antidote against the Berlin that players have started to switch more to the Italian. So bishop c4, and now we see knight f6 by Gukesh. So developing the knight, attacking the pawn on e4, and Vidit plays the move d3 to defend the pawn. Now, quick question for everyone. Besides the move d3, what is another very popular move that white has here? Question for both those of you in the classroom and those of you online. So d3 leads to the Gioco piano. And Gioco piano is the Italian word or translation for quiet game. So you see it becomes becomes a bit of a, the game becomes more quiet, and we'll see that in just a second.
You can cancel, right?
Well, if you cancel them, black is happy to take the pawn on e4, because now, let's say rook e1 can be met with d5, and that's a big difference with the real Lopez, where the bishop would be on b5. So, yeah, knight c3. I mean, knight c3 has been suggested in the chat. That's definitely a move. But white can also go for the move knight g5. This is called the fried liver attack. Where white is attacking the pawn on f7 right away. And now normally, let's say black would have this bishop develop. The move knight g5 is not a concern at all. Let me show you guys. Like, let's say you go bishop c5. White goes d3. Let's say we go knight f6 here. And white goes knight g5. Black's got a very easy way to deal with the white threat to the f7 pawn. Does anyone have any idea what it is? Yeah, indeed, here we just castle. So we just castle, defend the pawn, and this move is available since we've moved both our knight and our bishop out. Now the thing is, white can still take, but this trade is really in black's favor, because after all of these trades, we see that black's got two minor pieces for the rook and the pawn. Now, generally speaking, minor pieces are considered to be worth 3 points, as that'd be 6, and a rook is worth 5, and a pawn is 1. So you would say that's an even trade, right? But especially in the middle game, the minor pieces are often a lot more effective than the rook and the pawn. And also here, black's pieces are active, whereas white doesn't have anything developed just yet. So if black's got the bishop and the knight developed, you can just castle. But here, knight g5 is a bit of a concern, attacking the pawn on f7. A quick question for everyone. In case white goes knight g5, what is black's best move? Black actually only has one move to stop white from taking on f7. It's important to know this move in case you do walk into the fried liver.
D5?
Exactly, d5. Yep. d5 is considered to be black's best move, blocking the diagonal. And okay, there's some theory here, but I'm sure that Gukesh was prepared for all of these lines. Black often sacrifices a pawn, for example, white will take. Now here, taking with the knight is considered to be risky, as white can sacrifice the knight, then give a check over here, checking your king and attacking your knight. And so, because that black has to go king e6, but this is considered to be a good line for white. After knight c3, attacking the knight, and for example, in case you defend, I think here a good move for white is d4. White is down a piece, but black's king is super exposed on e6, and white can build up a big attack, like trying to open up the center, maybe bishop out here to put pressure on the knight. After he takes on e5, maybe queenside castles to put even more pressure on the knight on d5. So this is a risky line. The main line continues here with knight a5. Like I said, black often sacrifices a pawn, but black does have pretty good compensation. So Vidit went for something else. He plays the move d3, and like I said, this is really the start of the Gyoko piano. Now the thing is, white can play like this, and if you don't want to study too much theory, I guess this is definitely a line you could look into, because white usually goes d3, then c3, castles. Often an idea is to move the rook to e1, and then sometimes knight d2 to f1 to g3. And the plans and ideas will often be the same. But I would say, I wouldn't recommend this unless you're a GM. I wouldn't recommend this line, because there are so many different plans and ideas that you have to remember. And yeah, it's just a little bit much. And I would recommend it with white, that you play something a little bit more aggressive if you're just starting out. So maybe, maybe something like the Frei Liver. But at the top level, this is considered to be quite critical, because white is hoping to get a very slight advantage. But the drawback is, again, that black's got so many different plans and ideas. So after d3, black's main move is just to develop the bishop to c5. But Gukesh goes a6. And with the move a6, he's making sure that if he ever puts the bishop here, the bishop can always drop back to this a7 square. All right, so Vidit just castles. And now he plays the move h6, which is quite interesting as well. So he delays his development. And normally we're not taught to play moves like h6 and a6 in the opening, right? We want to develop our pieces. But again, since white went for the slow approach with d3, it turns out that this is fine for black. And the move h6 is often quite useful, as black is stopping that move knight g5 in many variations to attack this, the attack over here, or bishop to g5 to pin the knight. So Vidit goes a4. With this move, white is gaining space, and another idea behind this move is that, let's say you play something like this, and black, let's say, plays here. Black can often try to get the bishop pair with a move like knight a5, and now the bishop cannot go anywhere. Well, whereas now, since white has played a4, let's say you do the same thing, like let's say here and knight a5, the bishop can always drop back to a2. So a4 is what we call a multi-purpose move. Not only is he gaining space, but he's also controlling this square for the bishop. All right, so now Gukesh finally plays the move bishop to c5. But by including these moves, he's making sure that he never has to deal with this annoying bishop g5 move, pinning the knight on f6. All right, and Vidit goes bishop to e3. Now with this move, he's offering the trade of bishops. However, the trade often is quite all right for white. I mean, you get these double pawns on e4 and e3, but I wouldn't say these pawns are weaknesses, because the pawns are doubled, but they're not isolated. I'd say when pawns are doubled and isolated, they're often very weak, simply because they cannot be protected by their adjacent pawns, right? Whereas here the pawn on e4 is nicely protected by that pawn on d3, right? So black can take, but Gukesh decided to play the move d6. Instead of giving white double pawns, he's allowing Vidit to give him double pawns. Also, by the way, one thing that's important to point out is that after this trade, white also does get the half-open f-file, which can give white some attacking ideas. So d6, interesting move by Gukesh. Now, white can take and give black the double pawns, but here we see that, again, the pawn on c5, even though it's doubled, it's not really a weakness, because it can always be protected, let's say by a pawn on b6. And now black's got a pretty nice grip over the d4 square. So again, important to keep that in mind. Double pawns often are completely fine, but But you don't really want to have pawns that are doubled and isolated. Then they can often be weaknesses. All right, so Vidit goes knight bd2. Gukesh castles. Again, both players do not mind their opponent trading. We see c3 by Vidit, rook e8 by Gukesh, and now b4. So he's attacking the bishop, and he's prompting Gukesh to make a decision with the bishop. Again, we see white gaining more and more space. Now, you can drop the bishop back, but I like Gukesh's decision here. He decides just to trade off the bishops. White recaptures. So we see again, white's got a lot of space. He's got that half-open f-file to work with, potentially. And he also has this bishop over here, which is potentially putting some pressure on the f7 point together with the rook. So one move does Gukesh play here to alleviate some of the pressure on the f7 point. Bishop e6. Yep, bishop e6. He doesn't mind the trade of bishops because then there will no longer be pressure on f7. Now here, Vidit, he's got quite a bit of space, but I think here he makes a mistake. He plays the move b5, attacking the knight. Now, perhaps what he was hoping for was that Gukesh would play a move like knight e7, because here white can take and double the black pawns. Now, even though these pawns are not weak or anything, the structure is now symmetrical. White also has more space. And to be fair, this pawn on e6 can be attacked in some variations with a move like queen b3. So instead of going to e7, Gukesh had another idea. What do you guys think it could be? Where do you think he went with the knight? Right, so knight a5 is a move as suggested in the chat, but the drawback is that often your knight gets kind of stuck there, and it will not be easy to bring the knight back. For the same reason, I also don't really like knight a7. The knight is also sitting kind of passive over there. So Gukesh played the move knight b8, which might seem somewhat counterintuitive on developing the knight, but then I can just jump back to d7. And also, we're no longer in the opening stage of the game. The position is fairly closed, so you can't afford to lose to tempi like this in developing the knight and then bringing it back to d7. And as we will see later, this move b5 actually is weakening Vidit quite a bit, because he is also now given up the c5 square, and black's knight can potentially get to that square. All right, so Vidit finally decides to trade. Black recaptures. Now Vidit goes queen to c2. The knight comes back to d7, and now Vidit goes d4. So he's grabbing more space in the center, but the drawback of the move d4 is that now the pawn on e4 becomes a little bit weak. Right? We talked about doubled pawns before, right? Now the thing is, the pawn on e4 is white's most forward pawn, and the pawn on e4 now is no longer defended by an adjacent pawn. It's not defended by the f-pawn. I mean, white doesn't have an f-pawn, and no longer by the d-pawn. So the pawn on e4 becomes a little bit weak, specifically also because this pawn is behind it. Right? If this pawn was gone, then white could always put a rook here to defend the pawn that way. So here we see that e4 becomes a little bit weak. And so Gukesh finds a nice way here to target white's weaknesses. Indirectly, I should say. Now, one thing that's very important to keep in mind is that, of course, we don't want to take, because white will recapture. Now white has undoubled their pawns, so white's got a pretty nice center here. Right, so we don't want to do that. But like I said, Gukesh found a nice way to target white's weaknesses. And when we talk about the weaknesses, right, well, what are white's weaknesses in this position? He found a nice and subtle move in this position.
What about queen
Queen e8, great move. Yeah, because the pawn on e4 is a little bit weak. So you play queen e8. He's eyeing this pawn on e4, but he's also indirectly eyeing this pawn on b5. So his idea is to take, and then take here. And it's not so easy for white to deal with that. Now let's show that. Like, let's say you go king h1, black wants to take, and then take the pawn on e4, and black's won a pawn. Now, you can take with the knight and hit the rook, but now your pawns are doubled and isolated, and they're on a half open line. So the pawns are very weak here, and let's say black plays rook e5. It's very difficult to see how you're not losing the pawn on e4. So that's black's threat. He wants to take on d4 and then take on e4. Now, you can play d5, attacking the rook, and close the e-file. But the drawback is that here black just moves the rook back, and now this knight can go to the very nice c5 square. And putting pressure on the pawn on e4, and if the knight lands on c5, let me show you, the knight can never be pushed away by a white pawn. White does not have a d pawn attacking the knight, and white also doesn't have a b pawn anymore that can attack the knight. This knight on c5, together with the knight on f6, is putting nice pressure on the pawn on e4, and also potentially on the pawn on a4. So that is the drawback with the move d5. All right, so let's say in this position, and that's also why Gukesh played queen e8. Like queen e7, then d5 traps the rook. That would be a disaster. So queen e8, a nice little move. So let's say white plays rook fe1 to indirectly defend the pawn on e4. What can black do here to win a pawn? All right, so somebody in the chat suggested, All right, so some people in the chat, both on Twitch and on YouTube, suggested a take on b5. So what is the idea in case white recaptures? So let's say we take on b5, white recaptures, what is the idea?
Just trade rooks and then remove the defender.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so we can take first on b5, or maybe take first on d4, like let's say we take here, we trade off the rooks, then we take here, in the case white recaptures, now we take as the rook on e1, so I no longer has a rook defending the e4 pawn. Excellent, yeah. And still, even though white can take with the knight, I think this should still be in black's favor. After rook e5, this pawn is weak, the knight can come to c5 again. So that's his idea. It's not so easy at all to deal with black's threat, and that's why Vidit played rook ae1, defending the pawn that way. But this move also has a drawback. What is the drawback of playing rook ae1? This is no like direct drawback. Black doesn't have a way to win a pawn, but this is more a positional drawback, so to speak.
It's just now we can trade pawns and have the a5.
Exactly. Yep, and that's what Gukesh did. He traded on b5, and now he's controlling the only open file on the board. All right, so how can we quickly try to take control of that file? I mean, I guess there's multiple good moves. Gukesh played the move rook a5, attacking the pawn, c4, and now queen a8. Again, he's doubling up on the open file, and now he's ready to go for moves like rook a2, rook a3. Now, there's no immediate way for black to win material or anything with the rook over there, but it's going to be annoying for white to deal with. And furthermore, again, this pawn on e4 is always a bit of a weakness, right? You cannot just move your knight here. Or, I mean, you can for the moment, but this pawn often will be hanging. So, Vidit played h3, rook e8, king h2, and now Gukesh goes b6. Another nice move to, again, eye the pawn on e4 with both the knight and the queen. So, rook f2. All right, so now he played rook a2, queen e3, rook a3, queen b1, and now another excellent move, queen to a4. So, again, he's really paralyzing the white pieces a little bit. It becomes very difficult for white to move. Okay, so knight h4 was played. So what do we think Gukesh played here? What was the idea behind the move queen a4? How does black increase the pressure? Yep, just rook a8, triple on the a file. Excellent. Yep. So Vidit played knight f5, and here Gukesh just very calmly. Also, here's the thing: if Vidit has the chance, maybe he would like to go like knight e7. If the king moves over, then knight d5, taking this pawn over here. Like, let me show you. I don't know. Like, let's say Gukesh goes here. I think white would often like to give a check. Then knight d5, attacking this pawn. In case white takes, you can recapture with the pawn, and all of a sudden, white's queen comes to life, either the h7 or the f5, and here, you know, white's pieces free up a little bit. So that's white's idea. So what is a nice way to stop white from doing that? King f8, excellent. Yep, he stops that knight e7 check. All right, so rook ef1. And here I like the move he plays. He plays the move rook a1. So this move he's offering the trade of all of the heavy pieces. But even though black's not winning any material right away, this endgame looks quite bad for black. The pawn on e4 often is weak. This knight cannot move. And the pawn on e3 also can often be weak. Like, let's say white plays, I don't know, something like g4. You can maybe play a move like rook a3 with the idea to potentially attack the knight, and if the knight moves, then this pawn on e3 will often be hanging. Let's say go rook e2, maybe something like rook d3, with the idea to potentially kick the knight away, and so that then the pawn on d4 becomes weak. And white doesn't have a good way to alleviate the pressure. I mean, again, you don't want to go d5. Then knight c5 comes. This pawn is weak, right? And it's very, I feel like sooner or later black should win this endgame because white is just so passive. Black's just going to slowly but surely increase the pressure. So the endgame is very unpleasant. So Vidit played the move queen d3, and now Gukesh played queen b4. So with the move queen b4, he wants to go for moves like rook a3, again putting more pressure on the queen on d3. Now, even though white's got both rooks on the f file, he's got a knight on f5, there really seems to be nothing white can do. I mean, black can always trade off one pair of rooks. That always comes in very handy. There's no way for white to include the queen somehow in the attack. Like, let's say you sack the knight with the idea that in case I take, maybe you can take here. Well, I guess this should never work. Okay, yeah, I thought, okay, take some, but then, okay, you can take with the queen, but I guess you can always just take, and me takes with something like take, and I guess rook a2, and, or I guess rook d1. Something like this should be winning. I mean, there should be something for black that just wins. So even though white got all of those pieces on the king side, there doesn't seem to be a way for white to ever do anything. So Vidit traded, black recaptured, and he played c5. Trying to break through somehow. Now, of course, you cannot, let's say, take with the d pawn and then with the knight, because then this check will come. So Gukesh just takes with the b pawn. Now Vidit goes knight to c4. So he sacks a pawn, but he's finally bringing that knight to life. But what does Gukesh do here? Here Gukesh played a nice move. I mean, the b pawn, well, if you take the b pawn, I think white wanted to take here. You cannot take with the knight, as white's going to take. If you take the queen, you recapture, and if you take the knight, you hang your queen. And if you take with the pawn, I guess that should be possible, but he found something much better. And it has been suggested in the chat. Keep in mind that black's pieces are also pretty active. So how can we use our active pieces here? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Could we take the e-pawn and then take the knight if queen takes?
Right, we can take an e4, and in case white takes, I guess this could work, but the drawback is that maybe if you take, maybe there's something like rook b2, attacking your queen, and if you move the queen, then you can take the knight. So he came up with something much simpler. And what I really also like about it in this game is that both of these knights on f6 and d7 completely hold black's king side together. Right? As we saw a couple of moves ago, there's pretty much nothing white can do. So he's got a very solid construction there. But it's been suggested by some people in the chat, indeed, he played the move queen e1, attacking the rook and going for his own attack after the white king. So Vidit played rook e2. Alright, so what did Gukesh do here? He found a way to come up with a very powerful attack. First move is pretty straightforward. I mean, our queen's under attack, we have to move it, so where do you think we should go?
Guess g1 is...
Yep. Queen g1 check, the king moves here. Alright, so how do we continue our attack now? We want to bring more pieces towards that king.
I guess knight h5 and then bring the other knight.
Yep. Perfect. He played knight h5 check. Alright, so after knight h5, white only has one move, not to get checkmated right away. Where do you think the king should go? I mean, the king can go to g4, f3, or h4. I mean, black's winning after all of them, but two of those lead to a very quick checkmate, a very straightforward checkmate. Or let's go through the moves together. Let's say white goes king f3. Black has checkmate in, or like, how do we finish off the game here? It's checkmate in like 1, 2, 3 moves. Yeah. Rook f1, king up. Knight f6, king h4. How do we finish off the game?
Then pawn up.
Yep, and then g5. Excellent. Yep. So king f3, white gets checkmated this way. Oh, sorry. After king g4, we do the same thing. We go knight df6 check. Again, if the king steps back, there's rook f1, king h4, g5, and that's checkmate. Right, so king h4 is the only move for white, because now you cannot revert the move order, because if you go g5, like let's say you go g5, white takes, check, and I think white just wins, because the king is quite safe over here. Yeah. All right, so we cannot do that. All right, so what do we do instead? How do we continue our attack?
Then knight f6 to...
Yep.
checkmate?
Knight df6 to threaten checkmate on g5. So white took over here with the idea that, okay, now in case of g5 he can take, right? Now you can take the knight, but white's going to take here. Again, this might all still just be winning, but at least white is playing on for a few more moves. I assume this should just be winning, just taking the knight. But Gukesh comes up with a more straightforward way to get to the white king, and so he plays queen h2, threatening checkmate over here. White play knight f5, and now he goes rook f1. And his idea is very straightforward. He just wants to get rid of the knight, just take it. In some lines also, you can check over here, like let's say white plays, I don't know, something like here, trying to counterattack, then here rook f4 leads to, does it lead? Yes, this leads to mate. If you take, black takes, check. If you block, there's checkmate this way. And if you go g4, black takes, the h pawn is pinned, so that's checkmate. And if you go king up, then black takes. If you take, it's mate. And if you take with the king, then check, 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 and mate. So here the king does not escape. So that's his idea. So Gukesh instead Vidit goes g4. So with the move g4, he's attacking the queen. He's making sure that this is no longer a check. But here Gukesh finds a brilliant move. Let's see if anyone can find it. Yeah, there are probably multiple ways for black to win there. Yeah. Well, g5 has been suggested, but I think white takes, and there black, and then take here. Yeah, that might be winning. Yeah, suppose that has to be winning. Because at this point there are multiple winning moves. Okay, well the one he played is quite pretty. Gukesh plays rook takes f5, eliminating the knight. Let's say you take the queen. How do we finish it off? You're down a queen now. Fortunately for black, there's a way to justify the queen sacrifice. Exactly, g5, and again it's checkmate. Yep, perfect. All right. So, yeah, Vidit took the rook, but now there came a check. King here. And how does black finish it off? Checkmate in 2. Yep, knight h7, perfect. And this is where Vidit resigns. Because yeah, if you take, then there's checkmate on h3. So great game by Gukesh. Really a masterclass, I would say, how he outplayed Vidit with the black pieces, taking advantage of those double pawns in the center, and then taking advantage of that open A line. And it really showcases the principle of two weaknesses, right? The white pawns in the middle, I mean, they're a little bit weak, but it's very difficult to win the game alone based on that. But also he got that open A file, and that just created too many problems for white to deal with. So great game by Gukesh. So a very nice win by him. Vidit, unfortunately for him, he lost this game, but he did help his countryman Gukesh win the tournament. Because in this game, Vidit was up with the black pieces against Hikaru Nakamura. This is round 2 of the tournament. So let's have a look at this game. So Hikaru played e4. Hikaru, by the way, also had a good tournament. He was in contention for first place, but unfortunately for him, he missed out on first place by half a point. And so in this game, he goes e4. Okay, so Vidit also goes e5, once again at the top level. Meeting e4 with e5 is the most popular because it's just such a solid and reliable defense. Again, what is the worst that can happen? Maybe you can get a slightly worse position. But we see Hikaru going knight f3 here, knight c6. And Hikaru does go for the Lopez with bishop to b5. And here Vidit plays knight f6 again. This is the main reason why a lot of people also play the Italian, because the Berlin defense against the Lopez is just so super solid. Now just to show you guys, the main line after knight f6, at least historically, has always been castles. Black takes the pawn on e4, and white goes d4. So black takes the pawn, and because the white wants to open up the center to try to get to the black king. For example, you cannot take this. It's not good to take this pawn because of rook e1. Your knight is pinned, and if you go d5, white takes here. Again, that's why ideally you want to get your king out of the center quickly. But the main line after d4 continues with knight d6, attacking the bishop. White takes over here, black recaptures. White takes here, hitting the knight. Black goes here, and we get into this endgame. Now, at first glance, this endgame might look bad for black, right? Because you've got doubled pawns, your king is stuck in the middle, white's got this half open d file to attack your king with. But one big trump that black has is the fact that he's got the bishop pair. Now this endgame was always considered to be bad, but really due to the efforts of Vladimir Kramnik, it got back on the map, so to speak. He actually used this to defeat Garry Kasparov in their World Championship match in 2000. Because with the black pieces, Kramnik just, he was able to make draws, he was able to hold, and he was able to win a game or two with white, and that's how he won the match. That's really the strategy that most top players use at the top level. They want to be solid with black and try to take their chances with white, especially in matches. But anyway, this is why Hikaru does not castle and he plays d3, just defending the pawn on e4. So black goes bishop to c5, and now to move c3. The idea behind the move c3 is that instead, like let's say you castle, black can go knight d4 and trade off a pair of knights, and black's considered to be quite okay here. So that's why c3, and also again, we've seen this in the Italian, c3 is often a useful move, just getting more control over the central squares. So black castles, white castles, and here Vidit plays d6, just defending the pawn on e5. Hikaru plays h3, and now to move knight e7. Quite a usual maneuver. The knight's headed to the g6 square, and then once the knight is on g6, he wants to go c6, attack the bishop, maybe push for d5 at some point. Again, it's a pretty typical maneuver to bring the knight to g6, because the knight on c6, even though it is developed, currently it cannot go anywhere because of that pawn on c3. Can I go to d4, can I go to b4? And that's why very often, again, black is rerouting that knight. So knight e7, but the drawback of knight e7 is that, at least for a move, you move the knight away from the center, which is why Hikaru tries to get more space in the center with the move d4. Taking the bishop and a pawn on e5. Now, pretty much for as long as I can remember, I also have been playing the Berlin both from the white side and the black side. Black's main move always used to be bishop e6, just moving the bishop back. And here white has a lot of options, like let's say rook e1, knight d2, or bishop d3, defending the pawn over here. But Vidit comes up with, I don't know if this was a novelty, but at least a move that has not been seen a lot before. Instead of moving the bishop, he goes pawn to c6, creating a counterattack on the bishop. Now at first glance this might look very weird, right? Because white can take on c5, you take over here, and take on d6. But even though white's winning a pawn here, it turns out that black's doing quite okay after knight g6, because this pawn on d6 is a little bit cut off from the other pawns, and black should be able to pick it up in the foreseeable future with something like queen b6 and bishop to e3. And also c6 was played instantly by Vidit, making it very clear that this was still his preparation. So bishop d3 by Hikaru, just moving the bishop back and defending the pawn. I like bishop d3 by Hikaru because with this move he's keeping the position quiet, so to speak, right? And if your opponent's playing quickly, you don't want to go into super sharp lines because it's clear that your opponent has prepared it with the computer. So if you make a mistake, then it's quite likely that your opponent knows how to punish you, right? So Vidit goes bishop to b6, and that's why I don't like the decision that Hikaru made here. I think he should have just continued with moves like rook e1, maybe knight d2. Again, the knight can often go here to f1 and g3, or sometimes to c4. But Hikaru takes the pawn on e5. Vidit recaptures, and now he takes again. And here, at first glance, it might seem like black just lost the pawn, right? Like, why would you do that, right? But there's actually a great way for Vidit to justify the sacrifice. Now the move is pretty difficult, so I'll play the first move for you guys. He goes bishop takes h3. Might be thinking like, what? Why did he just give up the bishop like that? Well, let's say white takes. What does black do here to justify that sacrifice? Now here's the thing, when we're calculating, we always have to look for checks, captures, and attacks. And I'll give you guys a hint. There's no good checks here. I mean, this is the only check you have, but this just gives up a bishop. You also don't have any good captures. I mean, if you take here, white recap, I mean, that's just, you give the queen, that gives up the knight. But perhaps look for attacks. How can you create some threats that are difficult for white to deal with. And a move has been suggested in the chat that is the right idea, but unfortunately not the right move. Notorious Grizzly Bear and Patrick, you guys have a nice idea, but unfortunately it doesn't work. Very good, Patrick. Does anyone in the classroom see it?
My first idea is queen c7, but I'm not sure.
Queen c7 is a great idea to attack the knight. Let's say the knight moves. What can we do now?
Well then, queen g3.
Queen g3, perfect. And the queen cannot be taken as the pawn is pinned. And black at least gets a draw here and probably should be winning after king here, maybe like rook d8. You don't have a way to defend the bishop. However, after queen c7, white has bishop f4 to defend the knight. So the move here is in fact queen b8. Because let's say white goes bishop f4 now, what can black do here? I'll give you guys a hint. This move is not available after queen d6 or queen c7. Exactly. Here, black has bishop c7. Yep. Attacking the knight, and white doesn't have a way to protect it. And so black wins the piece back, and white's king is a little bit exposed. But having set A and taking that pawn on e5, Hikaru still should have gone for this, because here, after bishop h2, takes in f4, white's probably doing quite okay. I mean, you do have the two bishops, you also have quite a few pawns in the center, so you should have gone for this. Instead, he made a rash decision to go knight to c4. But like I said, if you say A, you also have to say B. If you go knight c4 now, black's captured a very important pawn around the white king. Right, white has captured a center pawn, but it feels like the white king can become quite vulnerable over here. So Vidit goes bishop g4, taking the queen. Now, this is not an easy move to deal with, as you don't have to move f3 available. So we play queen to c2, and now Vidit just moved his bishop to c7. And again, it feels like this white king over here can easily get into some trouble. Like, let's say black gets a couple of moves, like let's say, I don't know, you go knight here, maybe like knight g6 or something, maybe, I don't know, like knight h5, queen h4. Things become pretty scary, you know? If the queen lands here, it's not that easy to deal with this checkmating threat. So white's king always is going to be weak. So Hikaru played e5, and now Vidit just moved his knight back to d7, just hitting the pawn over here. Just giving up this pawn, but again, black's got a pretty big lead in development. All of black's pieces are developed, both knights, both bishops, and white still has this knight on b1, the bishop on c1, that are not playing. Now Hikaru for the moment is up a pawn, but black is also threatening to trap the bishop with g6. Like, let's say you go here, you do have to reckon with this one, and black might just pick up the bishop. So Hikaru moved the bishop back to d3. Oh, sorry. Bishop d3. But here Vidit plays another great move. He goes b5, attacking the knight. The knight jumped back, and now he takes the pawn on e5. And again, black's got such a big lead in development. All of the pieces are active. And yeah, for the moment, this bishop is on attack. So he goes bishop to e2. Somebody's pointing out, isn't it a normal expression to say, like, having said A, you should also say B, or no?
Something like that.
Oh, okay. I don't know if it's a chess player's expression, but yeah. All right, bishop e2. Okay, so this bishop is on attack. How do you all think we should deal with the attack on the bishop? Vidit finds a way to defend it, but in an active way. Because he wants to try to direct more pieces towards the king side. Right, so I don't really like the trade, because then white recaptures and the queen can quickly come here. He finds a nice way. The right move has been suggested in the chat. Vidit played the move f5, defending the bishop. So he's just keeping it here, and now if he gets a couple of moves, he would love to go, let's say, knight g6. And again, with the queen coming to h4, things can quickly get out of control for white. So Hikaru goes f4, attacking the knight, but here Vidit comes up with another crusher. Plays the move, well, with the move f4, Hikaru's attacking the knight, but he's further weakening the king. Right, as now this diagonal has become pretty weak for white. So how does Vidit take advantage of that?
I'm thinking maybe if we do bishop e6, maybe we could win the knight back.
Right.
We have quite a few moves to do.
Indeed, bishop e6 was played, because indeed, if you take, then I think knight d5 is just crushing, attacking the knight. Like, let's say white takes, I guess you take. So you get the knight back, then you also get the bishop back, and again, it's always so scary if the queen comes down here, it's just checkmate. It feels like black should be winning one way or another. So Hikaru played king f2, and now Vidit played knight d5, putting more pressure on the knight. And again, if you take over here, so it's like queen h4, queen g5, there's always got to be a way for black to win the material back and keep the attack going. So Hikaru gave a check, king over. Now he takes the knight. So how does Vidit continue his attack here? How does he bring more pieces in? Yep. The queen g5, putting more pressure on the knight. No worries, no worries. All right, so yeah, there's simply no way to defend the knight. So this is just terrible. Black's just getting an attack for free. I mean, for the moment he is down a piece, but he's going to win it back. And this king has got absolutely nowhere to hide. So Hikaru goes king to e1. Vidit takes the knight. White takes, he recaptures. C trade on e3. Now queen e2. Now of course black can trade off the queens here and go into an endgame and go knight c2 and win the exchange. But even though black is winning here, it's still going to require some work, because white can put the knight here, hang on to the pawn for the moment. Black's attack is just so strong that it's a bit of a pity to just cash in only an exchange in an endgame. So he gives a check, king d2. All right, so how does he continue here? Just bring in more pieces.
D8, I guess the A rook to D8.
Yep, rook a8, king c1. And now, how does he try to go after that king on c1? Someone's making a good point in the chat. Never let Hikaru keep making moves, he might swindle. That is very much true. If you have Hikaru, you got to finish him off. And that's what Vidit did here. So how does he continue his attack? Indeed, he just played queen to g5 to eye the king on the c1 square. And there's simply nothing for white that white can do. For example, let's say you go knight d2 to block. White can just go knight c4, attacking the knight twice. And if you go rook d1, pretty straightforward line to finish things off here is to take on d2 and then go rook d8. Black's simply going to take here, b up a piece, and have a crushing attack. This is absolutely over. So Hikaru played b3 to try to create an escape for his king, but here Vidit found a very easy and efficient way to finish the game off. Black actually doesn't have checkmate or anything, so don't look for it, but it's got a very easy way to win material here. Right, so rook d5, but the king goes here. You can bring the other rook in, but there's no threat for the moment. And this is kind of what I was saying, you know, like, if you've got Hikaru in a position like this, you gotta try to finish him off, you know, so he will not swindle you. So the move Vidit went for is just a... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
B3 is...
Oh, sorry, yeah, b3, yeah. So the move Vidit went for is knight f1 check. Taking the king. And the idea is that in case white goes king b2, and just knight g3. Taking the queen and the rook. Now, as I said, I was showing that one line earlier, right, where black just wins the exchange. But here it's a lot more powerful because for the moment the queens remain on the board. Right, so black keeps that powerful attack. You know, just take here, and then something like queen e3, you can always pick up this pawn over here, and white's king remains in a world of trouble. So this is absolutely crushing. I mean, white's down the exchange, it's also going to lose a pawn, and it's still not really developed. I mean, if you go knight e3, this is probably still going to lead to a disaster after rook d2 check. So after knight f1, Hikaru just resigned. So absolutely crushing game by Vidit, and I don't think I've seen Hikaru lose like this in a very, very long time. I mean, especially with the white pieces. So great game by Vidit, and this also definitely hurt Hikaru's chances in the candidates. I mean, he came back in the tournament, but he still came half a point short of first place. So had he not lost this game, and he by the way also lost another game to Vidit later in the tournament. So Gukesh definitely has his countryman Vidit to thank for his victory. So yeah, those were the games I wanted to show all of you. Really appreciate everyone for coming out to the classroom, but also thanks everyone for watching, both on Twitch and on YouTube.